Hi, so welcome. It's the ITAM Accelerate videos that we do. So we really should have a title for them. Anyway.
So slick. So slick.
Anyway, today Rory and I are talking about create and maintain a SAM plan process, which could also be known as define an ISO 19770 management system, because this process is the heart of your management system, your IT asset management system. All of the stuff that we spend so much of our lives doing around license management, tracking down missing pieces of hardware, trying to understand our cloud costs, they are the things we do to achieve the outcomes of our management system. But the management system itself, how we govern and control the achievement of the outcomes that we want to achieve, is actually something separate. And I was speaking to somebody who does certifications against ISO 19770 a couple of months ago, and she said it's really interesting because she sees lots of organizations that do amazing things from IT asset management perspective, but they're missing the management system. They're missing the things that we need to do, that we do in this process. So she has to work with them to get them to establish, to do the things in this process, because in order to get them certified against ISO. So if you're interested in in certification against ISO 19770, the create and maintain a SAM plan process is the core of it. It's the most important one.
Yeah, and I think it's worth too giving a shout out to the ITAM forum as well, who are an offshoot of WG21. Again, if you're interested in certification, either as an individual, as a professional, or indeed for your company, it's definitely worth getting on LinkedIn, typing in ITAM forum and seeing what you can do to join that particular group.
Yeah. So this is part one of the to create and maintain a SAM plan process. And then we will also do a part two. And the reason is because otherwise the video will just get too long. That's simple as that, really. So the key process which feeds into this is the corporate governance process. And that's where you define your vision and strategy and your policy, and your sponsor says, great, I can see we really need to do this. It's clear what we need to do, what I'm going to get for my money. I'm going to allocate some resources. So the next thing you need to do is figure out how you implement SAM or HAM or your cloud management system. So the first thing we need to do is be clear about the risks that our organization is exposed to. So for the majority of organizations, IT asset management is a risk-driven activity. So the first thing that ISO asks us to do after we've defined our vision and strategy and policy is to define or refine the risk assessment framework by which we're going to measure our risks. Now, it might sound like you have to actually do some work at this point, but it's entirely possible that your organization already has a risk framework within which you need to operate. So understand that, because very few organizations these days don't actually have a technology risk framework. Don't create your own unless you absolutely do not have one that exists within your organization. You need to ask around and find it.
And I think the nice thing about that is that if there is an existing risk assessment framework, they will be looking at aspects of the business you may not have given thought to. You could be that you're in your current position because you are that subject matter expert in and around SAM or ITAM, but you may not have a vision or an idea around logistics, legal, procurement, production, whatever is going on in your organisation that makes it that little bit unique or different to others that you could have worked for. So at all times do plug into that if possible.
Yeah. So we didn't mention it in the corporate governance process, but one of the things that needs to feed into your strategy is your understanding of what risks your organisation is subject to around your IT assets. But measuring them is how you do it with this framework. So the next thing you do is you need to think about what processes you need to have in place in order to implement your vision. And you need to be able to document and write what these processes need to be. So you may do it at a high level. We need an asset introduction process. We need a asset disposal process. Or you may want to do it at a more granular level. So we need a software request process, or we need a hardware request process, or a hardware disposal process. So how you structure your process ecosystem will depend on you and your organization, and how your organization structures and writes its own processes. So obviously the kit is here to help you, because we've done we've structured our processes at quite a granular level. So the kit itself includes in it the specification of the operational processes. So we say, right, these are the processes that we're going to need to implement, and this is what the processes are meant to achieve. So you've got your primary and your secondary objectives in there. So you need to be clear what processes you need to implement, because from there you need to think about how you're going to implement them.
Yeah, because it's going to call in that process. I always say processes are the glue of sound, because it pulls in the technology and it pulls in the people in a direction that, strange enough, is set by the policy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. And of course, the thing is, with people and tools and external partners are relatively interchangeable. Your processes are not. Your processes are just what you need to do to achieve your outcome. But in order to implement those in order to operate those processes, I should say, you can have people operating them. You can have a tool helping the people operate the processes, or you can have a partner, or you can have all three. You can have them in, you can outsource as much as possible of your IT asset management, or you can insource as much as possible of your IT asset management. But what doesn't change are the fundamental processes that you need to operate in order to achieve the outcomes defined in your vision and strategy.
Okay.
So we are clear about what processes we need to operate. We need to then define the objectives, what those processes are meant to achieve. And again, in the kit, we've helped you do this, because we've defined primary objectives and secondary objectives for each of the processes.
Yeah, and do be aware as well that, of course, we've talked about scope and IT scope. Should we say management system scope as part of the policy. Your scope is going to be influenced by how far your processes can reach, how far your technology can reach, and how far your people can reach too. So it's all very well saying, oh, well, we'll create a software request process. That might work for the UK, but it may not work for Japan. So just be careful that you think it's a one-size-fits-all, particularly if you are in that global organisation. It's not going to be that. It's going to be iterative. It's going to modify and adapt to the situations that it finds itself in, if it is going to work properly.
And when you're thinking about your objectives for each of your processes, this is where we also start thinking about how we're going to measure whether or not those objectives have been achieved. So this is where we start defining our critical success factors and our key performance indicators. So the processes themselves will have KPIs associated with them, and then we also need KPIs associated with the tools and the people and the partners that are operating our processes, just to make sure that we can tell when things are not running as smoothly as we'd like. So also, and again, actually, we've done this in the kit. We've provided some KPIs to get you started as well, different ways of measuring the processes, so that you can see in future whether or not your processes are being successful.
Just under that point too, with KPIs, wherever possible, automate.
Yes.
Don't have somebody stood there with a pen and a clipboard. It's going to drive morale through the floor, and the measurement of the KPIs is going to become more onerous than actually running the process in the first place. So don't go down that hole.
Yeah, and the other thing is, don't have too many. So only try and measure a few things at once. And how you figure out what are the really important things to measure are by defining your critical success factors. They're the things that have to happen for the process to achieve its objectives. So be really, really clear about what the genuinely important one or two things to measure in each process is. Don't go overboard. And you don't even, and the other thing is, I'd say, shake it up over time. You can change your KPIs over time. People say what is measured matters. And of course, if you're picking and choosing only one or two things to measure at a time, then that means that some of the other things that are also pretty important might be being lost. And the very act of measurement can change outcomes. So be very, very careful about what you're measuring, recognizing that that can actually manipulate and skew people's behavior in ways that you might not necessarily want. So also think about what adverse effects measuring something might have. You know, what are the bad things that might come out of this measurement? There's lots of stuff that could be said around KPIs, I tell you. And then like I said, you know, maybe 1 year measure it's a few things, and then the next year measure some different things, just so that you're not potentially skewing your management system in a particular direction because you're only focused on a you know, very specific things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to think about.
I think so. One other aspect that we haven't yet mentioned around that is, of course, is that your one process could have KPIs not just from SAM but also from service management, for InfoSec as well, and there could be different types of KPIs. So roll with it. You know, if you're gonna get IT buy-in, if you're going to get business buy-in, don't be purely focused on compliance. It could be that there is time taken to one of the requests for a software request process. That's a yardstick for service management, but that has to have a degree of flexibility as well, because the time taken to manage a request for an Oracle database will be completely different from a PDF reader. So that has to be factored in how you would score that metric against service management for honouring the request.
Yep. Yeah, lots and lots of things to think about with KPIs.
Yeah.
So the next thing is to, from an ISO perspective, is to define something we call a statement of applicability. So this is where you define the processes. So you take that list of processes and your objectives and you say, right, these are the processes I'm going to implement or I'm going to operate in order to achieve the goals that we identified in our vision and strategy. And it's a document, so you do need to document these, and that forms, I guess, the core document of your management system.
Yeah. One thing too, on particularly with regards to certification, what you're going to find is that if you do get certification for your organisation, you will be rightly proud of putting that certificate on the wall in reception. It needs to be accompanied by a statement of applicability to support that certification as well. You don't have to, you can have a customer facing version that correlates to something that you feel offers commercial in confidence information as part of that statement of applicability that is internal only. So having two versions, so long as they align, is okay. Just be careful of that. So it's particularly common. I think I see it more in information security. It's generally with regards to certification, 27001 is much further down the road. So they've seen that, done that before.
Yeah. So I think that's it really. We're halfway through the create and maintain a SAM plan process. So we'll take a break there, and next month we'll talk about the rest of it.
Yeah, stay tuned, and we'll see you next month.
See you later.